Okay, you're in Rishon. Today is Sunday. Today's your test, right? Today's your test Shvat.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's Chav Shvat. Chavei Shvat is Wednesday this year. Okay, we're doing Tanya, Rabbi Yossi. We're doing Tanya. Page. We're going to start from the very, very bottom of page Zayin Amud Aleph. The last words. We're on page Zayin Amud Beis, which is page 14. Now, I've given you two classes. The 2 classes ago, we learned about Chokhmah. The last class, we learned about Bino. I'm going to read it over again. But I'm not reading it over again because I want to reteach it. I'm reading it over again because I want to... This is Pei Gimel. Pei Gimel. Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. I'm reading it over again because I want to segue, I want to lead into what I want to do today. So let's start from the beginning. The Alter Rebbe is discussing the 10 koyches hanefesh, the 10 faculties of a person's neshama that correspond to the 10 spheres. And he says, Kihine haseichel shebenefesh hameskel. Let's turn the page. Haseichel means this. The intuitive brain. The brain has different parts. And certainly Beruchnius, the Koyach HaSeichel has different parts. The word Seichel in Chassidus means Chochmah. Seichel is a general term for intelligence, and it's specifically a term for Chochmah. In Tanya, sometimes it's contradicted, it's different. But in Chassidus, Seichel means Chochmah. Chochmah, if you have to translate it, means the creative mind or the intuitive mind. Chokhmah is either, from a psychological perspective, you have to use a word that people know what it means, and associate with Chokhmah. So Chokhmah is either the mind that creates new ideas, or the mind that intuits, that feels. He doesn't even know why, but he knows without knowing that this is how it is. So Seichel, Shebenefesh HaMeskeles, which means the power of intuition in the neshama of Seichel, Shehu HaMaskil Kol Davar, which intuits all new ideas. I'm using the word intuit as a verb. Nikra b'shem chokhmah. It's called chokhmah koyach ma. The power of ma. And we spent a whole Sunday on this 2.5 lines. And what I explained to you is that the nefesh, the neshama, the subconscious, is full of seichel. But what the neshama knows, we don't know. And when a person learns, person is involved in knowledge and reaches an impasse, they're stuck. They cannot move on. So there is a process of bittul, a process of frustration, a process of recognizing the limitations of what they know. There's a process of admitting to themselves that they're limited. That act of admitting to oneself, that humility, that bittul, that a person recognizes the limitation of their own mind is called koyach ma. Ma means the ability to acknowledge one's limitations. And the idea is that when one acknowledges the limitations, that alone opens them up to the neshama giving them new ideas. In other words, chokhmah has 2 parts. Chokhmah has what you do, and chokhmah has what happens. What you do is humble yourself. What you do is admit that you don't know. What happens is that the neshama gives you new information, new ideas. And we call this Barak HaMavrik, a flash, an enlightenment, a lightning flash. Something goes off in the head, so that's what Hu HaMaskil Kol Davar means. So Chokhmah has 2 parts. Chokhmah has the part of a person acknowledging their own limitations, the frustrations that they have about their own limitations. And the so-called schar, in other words, the reward for it is an enlightenment of the flash. And that's what Chokhmah is. Chokhmah is a very, very rich light that comes from the neshama, which means the subconscious, to the brain, which means the consciousness of the person, very quickly. That's what Chokhmah is. Now, there's an upside and a downside to Chokhmah. There's something very good about Chokhmah, and there's something very bad about Chokhmah. What's good about Chokhmah, the Chokhmah is very rich. When a person gets a new idea, the new idea is always very, very exciting and enlightening. But there's a lot of problems with that flash. Number one, it isn't always true. A lot of times you get good ideas and they're stupid. So you have to measure them. You have to see if they work, yeah? And number two, they don't hold, they don't last. You get this enlightenment, you get this rich flash, and then you forget it. and you're stuck in the same darkness that you were in before. Because the flash by itself is not thorough enough, it's not brought down enough for you to automatically have. So Chokhmah brings a new idea to you, but it brings an idea to you in a very, very rich way. And it brings a new idea to you in a very, very sudden way. And if you don't act on it, immediately you'll forget it. So what you do is you go away from Chokhmah and you go to Bina. And going away from Chokhmah and going to Bina is a job. And we continue to read. Now goes Bina. And when you actualize the koyach, the potential, the possibility, and the way we're going to translate koyach goes on the chokhmah itself, the possibility that exists in the light of chokhmah, elapel to actualization. And how does this work? Shemizboinen, one contemplates, one considers, besichle in his mind, lahavin davar la'ashure, to understand it thoroughly, ula'amke and deeply. Miteich eze dvar chokhmah, from a thought of chokhmah, hamuskal, and I'm translating the word muskal again, that's intuited, that flashes, besichle into the conscious mind of the person, and then Bina processes it. Says the Rebbe Nikra Bina, that's Bina. In other words, people who learn, and people who don't learn, people have questions, they don't have answers to, and periodically there's a flash that comes from the neshama to the consciousness of the person, which offers resolution, offers clarity, offers explanations and answers. Again, I'm trying to do this briefly because we dedicated a whole class to Chokhmah and a whole class to Bina. This is simply a chazorah. But without going over all the particulars and all the details and all the arichas, when you get that flash, if you do nothing with it, in a matter of seconds it's gone and you're stuck in the same place you were before. When the neshama gives you a lichtigkeit, and you let that be, you forget that lichtigkeit, and you're stuck in the same darkness you were. There's only one eitz. The eitz is to analyze the flash. What your neshama gave you has words. What your neshama gave you has an idea. And you think about it. What happens when you think about it? What happens when you think about the flash that the neshama gives you? The first thing that you have to do is you have to lose the whole geschmack. When you have a new idea, you're very excited about it. When you start to think about it becomes very depressing. Depressing because there's so much to think about and it's work. And depressing because you have to give up the oil. You have to give away the richness of the flash that the neshama gave you. But that's the only way something constructive, something useful, something lasting is going to come from that idea. If you have an enlightenment and you sit and analyze it, so you have to give away what's called in the Chassidus the oil, the richness of it, the excitement of it goes away, and you sit and you study it. An idea came to you, and you question it. Is it a true idea? Is it a false idea? Is it a practical idea? Is it an impractical idea? That process is called Bina. And as exciting as Chokhmah is, Bina is boring. But Bina brings the emes to you. When you have this flash and you analyze it, the analysis of Bina is going to bring to you, first of all, whether this flash is useful or not useful. And second of all, assuming that it's useful, how it's useful. And then you understand it. And you put it into many, many words. And when you understand it and you put it into many, many words, you don't forget it. And it doesn't pass. And most importantly, you could teach it to somebody else. The enlightenment of Chokhmah, even if you're the biggest Chokhmah in the universe, you cannot transmit that to somebody else. It's good for you. When you study it and you understand it and you bring it down, now you can explain it to somebody else. This is a brief review of Chokhmah and Bina. Now, the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, Vehein, Heim, Avaim. That the intuition, the enlightenment, the haskalah, the intuition of Chokhmah and the analysis and the thorough study of Bina is Avaim, is Chokhmah and Bina that give birth to the Midas. Now I want to just say something. What comes after Bina? Das. Chokhmah, Bina, Das. So, what should happen now is that the Alter Rebbe should talk about Das, but he doesn't. He's going to talk about Das at the bottom of this page. This is one of the shortest Perakim in Tanya Perigim. The Alter Rebbe at this point immediately brings in the Avas Hashem Yiras Hashem. The Neshama gives you a new idea. Your mind analyzes, processes, and understands this new idea, which is called Bina. And when you understand what your Neshama gave you as an intuition, then you can develop Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. You're going to see later. Alter Rebbe is going to say that there's a very, very big difference between Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem that comes from Bina, and Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem that comes from Das. The Alter Rebbe says that if a person understands something very well in his mind, and he gets excited about it, and he has no Das, the Alter Rebbe is going to call it Dimyoinei Shov. We speak Hebrew. Dimyoinus means fantasies, Shov that are worthless. The Alter Rebbe is going to say that if a person develops Avas Hashem, excitement about the Eibush because he understands an idea, and he lacks Das, Alter Rebbe is going to say very strong words about how this is no good. This is called Dimyoinei Shov. In other words, for a person to be excited about Hashem, Avas Hashem, to be excited about the Eibush, and the excitement about the Eibush should be purposeful, you must have Das. Chochmah and Bina is not enough, you have to have Das. So, again, if another person but the Alter Rebbe was writing the Tanya, they would first explain Chochmah, then they would explain Bina, then they would explain Das, and then they would explain the Midas. The Alter Rebbe doesn't do this. The Alter Rebbe explains Chochmah, and he explains Bina, and he immediately explains Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. At the bottom of the page, he goes back to Das, and he says, oh, by the way, if you have Chochmah and Bina and no Das, the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem that you develop, Teugnisht. I don't know why the Alter Rebbe does this. I don't know why. But the good news and the bad news is the Alter Rebbe, you understand, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, and he knows what he's doing. The Alter Rebbe now, at this point, after Chochmah and Bina, puts in right away Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and at the end of the page he's going to say, but I want you to know that for the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem to work, there has to be Das. Okay, now I'm just going to say one thing. I'm going to learn with you now. This is what we're going to learn. We're going to learn about Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. That's the plan. I just want to say one thing about Das before we learn it, even though Das is not this week and probably not next week. Okay? The difference between a person getting excited from Bina, you learn about Hashem and you're excited about the Eibush, and a person who gets excited from Das is a very, very simple thing. When you learn about the Eibush and you understand the Eibush and you get excited, you're getting excited about the Haskalah, about understanding the Eibush. And there's a very, very big difference between understanding the Eibush and knowing the Eibush. Understanding the Eibush means I have no relationship with the Eibush. I have idea with the Eibush idea, with the concept of Elokus. Why is it if you understand the Eibush very well and you get very excited about the Eibush, the Alter Rebbe says it's nothing. The main is Shav. Because to get excited from understanding Elokus is not the same thing as getting excited from Elokus itself. You understand? There's understanding the concept of Getlachkeit and there's relating to Getlachkeit itself. That's what Das changes. Das doesn't make you one drop smarter. The difference between Bina and Das is not intelligence. Whatever you know in Das, you know in Bina. There's no difference. The only difference is that in Das, the Eibush is an idea. In Bina, the Eibush is an idea. And in Das, the Eibush is a reality. So Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, getting excited about the Eibishter, the way it's explained here in Tanya, has to do with understanding the Eibishter. But understanding the Eibishter doesn't mean I have a relationship with the Eibishter. Understanding the Eibishter means I have a relationship with my understanding of the Eibishter. I have to get past understanding to the Eibishter himself. That's Das. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to be discussing later. So what I've done is I've told you what's happened. I told you what's going to happen, and now we're going to learn. In other words, we've learned about Chochmah and Bina. We're going to be learning about Das later. Das is very, very deep. Das is very, very serious, and Das is very deep, and Das is not so simple.
Like being so grateful to Hashem, and you feel this excitement is different from, like you need to have Das. For that?
What the Alter Rebbe is describing is using your brain, your seichel, to come to the Eibishter. When a person has gratitude for Hashem, that has nothing to do with his brain. It has to do with his life. I'm going to answer you. When you have a physical life that you live, and you see the Eibishter in your life, and you see the Eibush in your life in a way that elicits from you feelings of gratitude, It's not an intellectual process. It's an emotional process. Why is it valid? It's not valid because the Eibishter is real. It's valid because your life is real. You're grateful for what? That you understood the Maimach Chassidus? Or you're grateful that he gave you health, and that he gave you nachas, and that he gave you arichas yomim? Those things you have to ask about. Why? Because they're real. To have das about health is very different than have das about the Eibishter. Why? The Eibishter you can't see. So if you see the Eibishter in your health, because you have das about health, you have das about the Eibishter who gave you this health. But if you sit down with a sefer, and you're learning about the Eibishter to understand with your brain, and you want that your understanding in your brain should make you have a connection to him. Here, das is much more tricky. It's a different thing. You follow? You understand what I'm answering you?
Yes, but that leads you to want to do more to say.
Point well taken. But this is a different idea.
Surely, if you're getting excited by beginning to understand a concept, it must be very easy to fool yourself that this is
real.
One's excitement.
Right.
They're both a feeling.
Right. Oh, so what's the teretz? No, so I got teretz.
I mean, just saying. Is there a way to know?
Is there a litmus test? It's a theoretical question for most people. Maybe for you it's not, but for most people it's a theoretical question because today most people come to the Eibishter not from their brain. The Alter Rebbe is describing something very deep. Coming to the Eibishter from your mind. I'm not going to answer you directly, but I'm going to answer you indirectly. This is why the Shita of Chabad, the philosophy of Chabad Chassidus and Chabad Chassidim and Chabad Avodah was that it was against his spoilers. We did not celebrate passion and emotion. We celebrated depth and quiescence. By the Mittler Rebbe, this was an extreme. The Mittler Rebbe himself never showed an external display of emotion towards the Eibishter, towards anything. And he demanded it of his Chassidim. And the primary reason was what you just gave. That premature excitement means I'm excited about something that has very little substance. No, so when do I know that I've graduated to thorough excitement? And the answer is, you better not find out. So the Chabad derech always was to hold the excitement inside. And by holding the excitement inside, you allow the excitement to become deeper because you seek a deeper excitement. That's the answer to your question. It's the correct answer. So now, of course, the question, so what should I do? What should you do? You should be grateful to the Eibishter for the brachas that he gives you. That's what you should do. But what says in Tanya, the idea of moyach shalt alev, using your mind to understand the Eibishter, to develop feelings of Eibishter in your heart, this is, in other words, the das element is not a poshet thing at all. It's very, very not simple.
That's why I've been Hasidim.
There's so much islahavos, right? In Polish Chassidim, they don't even use the word spoilers. They use the word Hislahavos. You almost never see that word in Chassidus Chabad. Hislahavos, flam fire. Because the whole Chassidus is that fire. And in Chabad, we use the word Hispoilus, which is a deeper word than Hislavos, and we put it down. Hispoilus means to react. Hislavos to have fire. Hispilus means a fire that comes from something. In other words, Hispilus is a deeper word than the word Hislavos, and we don't even like the word Hispilus. But we should be by the Chassidim. We be very well on our way to serving the Eibishter if we had that kind of madrege in our times. Okay, anybody else? So let's go. We're going to learn. Okay, we're going to learn. So I just want to say what we're doing now. We did Chochmah, we did Bina. We're doing Midas. When you understand the Eibush in your brain, you develop feelings for the Eibush in your heart. Das at the end of the page. But you have to understand that when the Alter Rebbe introduces Das, he means that the Das is not after the Midas. The Das has to add depth to the person's connection to what he understands, so that the Midas should be deeper. But let's learn. We're going to learn and we're going to teach. Okay, here we go. Says the Rebbe, V'hein heim avaim. And Chochmah and Bina are a father and a mother. If you've lost the place, it's 4 lines on the top of page 14. Tav Zayin Amid Beis. Hamelides, which give birth to Ahavas Hashem, a love for the Eibishter. V'yiraseh, the meaning of the word Yirah, for lack of translations, we're going to translate the word Yirah as awe, or perhaps we could translate Yira as respect, as a sense of seriousness. Ernstkeit. Ufachte. Pachad means I'm afraid. Pachad is an emotion, fear. So Yira is a much finer thing, and Pachad is a much deeper thing. And the Alter Rebbe explains, Ki, Ha-seichel shebenefesh ha-maskelet. The way the Eibishter made the human brain, it works in the following way. The intellect, the creative and thorough intellect, in the neshama, which is called nefesh ha-maskelet. Ki shemizboineinu ma'imik miyed. When it contemplates, when it analyzes, when it learns about and thinks about, and then delves deeply, Begedulas Hashem and the greatness of the Eibishter. And of course, when you're thinking about the greatness of the Eibishter, there's a lot of greatnesses. You can think about the greatness of the Eibishter, that He gives you health. You can think about the greatness of the Eibishter, that He gives you parnasa. You could think about the greatness of the Eibishter. I was thinking about it this weekend, the Bossi Lagani that we just finished. Yeah, one of the gewaldigste chedushim of that Maimed, the Rebbe says that if a person behaves appropriately in Inyoni parnasa, he gets a schar. What's the schar? That the emunah, that hu hanesil lechokeach lasis chayil, the emunah that everything you have comes from the Eibishter, leicht badir, shines in your neshama. In other words, sometimes what the Eibishter gives you is the Eibishter himself. It's also something that the Eibishter gives. But then there are higher things. That the Eibishter created the world. The Eibishter the balabas over the world. So when you use your brain to think about the Eibishter, you got so many things you could think about, and to some extent it's a choice. And the Alter Rebbe gives a number of examples. For example, the Eibishter fills up all of the world. The Eibishter is revealed in all of the world. V'seivev kalam, the Eibishter embraces all of the world, which means His Ein Seif is hidden from all of the world. And number 3, v'kula kamei, and in the presence of the Eibishter, Kloch Shiv, there's no world. These are 3 different meditations. V'mala kalaman is one is bandanus, Seivev kalaman is the second is bandanus, and kula kamei Kloch Shiv is a third hisbonenus. And even though the Alter Rebbe puts them one after the other as if it's like one long hisbonenus, there are 3 different meditations. But the point is, you have a brain, and you could use your brain to learn about the Eibishter and to think about the Eibishter. You could learn and think about the Eibishter on a level of Mamala Kalaman. You could learn and think about the Eibishter on a level of Seviv Kalaman. You could learn and think about the Eibishter on a level of Kulach Meklach Shiv. And if you put your brain into learning, understanding the Eibishter, you will get excited about the Eibishter. Nailed of and Seder. It will awaken, it will give birth to and awaken.
What does it mean by kula kame?
Kula, everything, kamei, in front of him, kloch hashiv, is like nothing. It's a third madrege. Kula, everything, it's Aramaic. Kula, hakel, lefonov, kiloi choshuv, that's how you would say it in Hebrew. Okay? Nailda, it gives birth to, and it awakens midas yiras haremus, emotions, regesh, feelings. And here he puts the feelings in a different order. If you were paying attention before, he said ahava, yira, pachad. Now he starts with yira. Yiras haremus, a awe, a fear, a respect for the greatness of the Eibishter b'meichi or machshavte, in one's brain and in one's thought. Later, to fear and to be embarrassed in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is beyond any person's understanding. That's number 1. And then he says, Upachad havaya belibe. After you have yira, which means respect and awe in your brain, you have fear, excited emotions of fear towards the Eibishter belibe in your heart. And then he says Vishuv, and afterwards, Yislahiv Libe, the heart becomes filled with flame. And here you have the word Yislavos, but Ahava, with love. So before he said Ahava Yira Pachad, now he says Yira Pachad Ahava. This is there's a letter for the Frierdiker Rebbe where he explains this. But Ahava Aza with a strong love. Cherish Peyesh. Cherish Peyesh means fire attached to coal. Fire doesn't have heat. And heat isn't fire, because lapitera, fire is flame. But the heat is the source of the flame, and the heat is the preservation of the flame. So Ava Aza Kirish Be'esh means it's a fire, and it's strong because it's attached to a heat source, like coals. V'chasheka, v'chafetza, u'tshuka, v'nefesh ekeka. Chasheka, these are Hebrew words, you have translated them in English. A longing, a desire, a thirst. V'nefesh tekeka, and a neshama, which is thirsty, l'gdulas ein seiv baruch Hu, to the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So simple, you use your brain, you think about the Eibishter, you learn about the Eibishter, you think about the Eibishter, you'll have feelings for the Eibishter. And ultimately, says the Rebbe, V'hi kaleis hanefesh. These feelings that a person has for Hashem could go so deep as to bring the person to a madrega of kaleis hanefesh. Kaleis hanefesh means where the neshama is literally leaving the body, which is of course a very high level of avos Hashem. Kediksiv, as the pasuk says, and he brings 3 psukim. Nichsefa v'gam kolso nafshi v'gev. Nichsefa is from the word kesef. Kesef means ahava. I want. I want the Eibishter, and I want the Eibishter to the extent that kolso nafshi, my nefesh, is going out HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the rest of the pasuk? Nichsecha v'gam kolso nafshi b'chatzreis havaya, l'chatzreis Hashem. And basically, this pasuk comes from a Hizbonenus in Mamalek Olam. Uksiv, then it says, someone nafshi le'elikim. The higher levels, a person associated to elikim, which is the second madrega. Uksiv, someone l'chon nafshi v'gein, which is even higher. The Rebbe brings 3 psukim, and the way we were taught in Tanya, these 3 psukim parallel the Hizbonenus of Mamalek Kalaman and Seviv Kalaman and Kuluk Mek Lachshiv. In the meantime, don't worry about it, okay? I'm reading this quick. I know I'm reading it quick, okay? Vatzimoin, and the thirst as miyaseid ha'esh shebenev shalakis. This want for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is really ahava, comes from the element of fire in the neshama that wants to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is written in Sfarim that explains the tava of a person, that a desire to connect to something outside of you that is strong comes from fire. It's written also in Kabbalah, the element of fire is in the heart. The source of water and moisture is from the brain. Is written in Kabbalah. That water is bechinas chokhmah shenikra mayim. Chokhmah is water. Shebenefesh alakis in the divine soul, which means that from chokhmah you have a connection to the Eibishter, which is like water, and from bina you have a connection to the Eibishter, which is like fire. Everybody understands? Let's move on. Of course, it's so obvious. Yeah. One more line, and then I'll talk. Okay. Ushara midas kulam. The rest of the midas and anfiya yirav ha'ava v'tel desein are the branches of Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem and their children. But Chassidus explains that later. Okay, if this was the United States Senate, we would call this a filibuster. I expect that you should say, what are you talking about? Okay. So I want to start from the beginning. I want to say the simplest thing. Okay. There's a Rambam, which Chassidus brings, and I've talked about this Rambam many times. And it's one of those Rambams that you can't weasel out of. It's such a strong Rambam. But Chassidus, what Chassidus wants to explain, Meya, Shalat, Alalei, they bring that Rambam. What is the Rambam about? The Rambam is about a soldier who goes to war. Wars are simple. The simplest environment in the world is a war, an actual war, not a potential war. You know why? Because in war there's 2 choices. You win or you lose. You understand? Everybody understands. Wars are not complicated. Wars, people come out and they kill each other. Rahman al-Islam. But that's what it is. It's simple. It's a very simple world. So obviously a soldier who goes to war has a lot to be afraid of. An awful lot to be afraid of, right? A soldier who goes to war has so much to be afraid of, you don't know how he goes. And of course the answer to that question is training. A soldier goes to an army barracks, joins an army, and he gets trained. And he does discipline, training. How much training does a soldier need not to go to a front? Of course, in the middle of a war, when they need soldiers, they don't have time to train them adequately. But training of a soldier above all else affects discipline. In an army, success and failure to a very great extent comes down to one simple thing. Mishmas. Do what you're told. I mean, the Rebbe talked about this so much. The Rebbe created Tzivos Hashem for this very purpose. But there is no environment in the world where the idea of discipline, Mishmas, what does Mishmas mean? Whatever you're told to do, you do. Who tells you? Your superior. Your boss. One of your superiors is younger than you. One of your superior is not as smart as you. One of you think you know better than your superior. Success and failure in war, which includes life and death, computer, is you do what you're told. He's the boss. It doesn't matter why. He's in the army more years than you. He has better training. In an army, listening to what you're told to do, following instructions is everything. When soldiers stop listening to the rules, the army collapses. Finished. So it's all about discipline. And of course, to stand and fight. When fire is around you, You need to have unbelievable discipline. The difference between a successful army and an unsuccessful army, on the most basic level, is how well trained the soldiers are. And basically, they take you into a barracks, and they scream at you, and they make you march, and they make you do push-ups, and they insult you every time you make a mistake. What they're doing is they're training you to follow, have blind obedience. You're going to be in a war, and bullets are going to fly, and you're going to stand there, and you're going to not move until somebody tells you to move. What about the bullets? It's not your concern. And a soldier is trained to do this, not to think. Yeah, it's a phenomenal thing. When it comes to the actual combat, comes to the fighting itself, some soldiers take to the training, and some soldiers can't take it and run away. Yeah, in the Chumash they're called Ish Hayare V'Rachalevov Yelech V'Yashal L'Beisei. You can't deal with it. Go away. We don't want you. Why? Because a soldier who's afraid and is prepared to run in the place of fire doesn't only endanger himself, he endangers everybody else. A soldier has to be able to stand and fight when bullets are flying, and that's what it takes to be a soldier. If you don't have that in your character, Torah says, Gei Aheim, go home. It's a pity, we need all the men we can get. But if you're the person who's going to turn tail and run the minute bullets start to fly, we don't want you here, because everybody else is going to turn tail and fly. Because everybody depends on the person next to them. It's a life and death situation. It's black and white. This is not moods, this is not emotion, this is Chaim and Mavis Kibshut. Okay? So you get the picture, yeah? Everyone sees the picture very clearly, or clearly enough. So the Rambam brings a pasuk. It's a din. The Rambam talks about war, the Rambam talks about Muhammad. And he talks about preparing a soldier, and taking him to the front, and telling him, if you're afraid, please go home. Don't stay here and be afraid, because you're going to put everybody else at risk. And once you decide that you're not afraid, and you're going to go and you're going to fight, they don't let you leave. Means that if a soldier is standing on the front, and he turns around to run away, there's people behind him would say, you go back and fight. And if he refuses to go back and fight, they could kill him. Kipshute. Why? Because if a soldier turns and runs, everybody, this is how it is. It's thousands of people operating as one body, and their whole power is that they're one. And if one guy stops being a part of that oneness, he can endanger the entire group. It happens all the time. So they have to stand and fight, yeah? You decided that you're not a Yori, you're not a Yerachalevov, you stay, now you can move. Okay? And then the Rambam says there's a lav deirais. The Rambam describes how a soldier gets ready to go to fight, and actually comes to the front. What happens before, and what happens before they come to the front, when they're standing by the front. There's different psukim that they have to read. They made announcements. They made announcements to soldiers in the camp. They made additional announcements to soldiers on the front. They're pushed mitzvahs in the Chumash. There's a whole seder of how an army, a Paltiel, has to get ready, be prepared to fight. And there's a speech made by Koyanim, by the generals. It was read and it was translated. It wasn't translated. For Shidduch halachas that the soldier was told immediately before going to the front, and then there were additional things told him as he stood by the front. And then the Rambam said, and when the bullets start to fly, so I forgot, it's a long Rambam. He should stop thinking about everything, and he should rely al Atzur Baruch Hu, on the Eibush himself. Don't think about your wife and don't think about your children. Think about nothing. And the Rambam writes that a person who stands in the front, who thinks about his wife and his children, is even alav. He's doing an Aveda. What's the Aveda? The Aveda is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. A soldier who goes to the front is told, don't be afraid. So of course the Rambam has the obvious question that every person with a half a brain understands. Don't be afraid. Bullets are flying. I mean, don't be afraid. It's life and death. What do you mean, don't be afraid? I have plenty to be afraid of. And the Rambam says, the only way to be Makayim, don't be afraid, is not to think. Because if you think, of course you're going to be afraid. So the Rambam says, it's an interesting idea, the lav of Le'yerach levavchem, I forgot the Lashonos in the Psukim, you're not allowed to be afraid of an enemy. The lav is don't be afraid, the lav is don't think. Because if you think, you will be afraid. It's human nature. You understood the Rambam? I think it wasn't so hard to understand the Rambam. Maybe the visual makes you uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable also, yeah? But so the Rebbe says, what does the Rambam teach us? The Rambam teaches us that when you think about something, you develop feelings. And you control your feelings by not thinking about it. So you have two ideas here, right? The immediate idea of the Rambam is, you have reasons to be afraid, you have reasons to be worried. The only way not to be afraid and not to be worried is not to think. Not nishtrach. So the Rambam, the other side is also true, that if you will think, you will be afraid. So Chassidus brings this Rambam and says, what does this Rambam teach us? The Rambam teaches us that whatever you think about, you feel. Now, to think about bullets and to feel like you're afraid of the sakone is very easy. Yeah? But it's a cloud that whatever a person thinks about, they will develop feelings for. What you think, you feel. You know, there's a Maisa, I've told you the story, come upon me. It's been a while since I told this story, but years ago I would tell this story all the time. It's a Chassidish Maisa. This is the Frierdiker Rebbe tells the story. That there was a Chassidish Fabrengen. And at the Chassidish Fabrengen there were sitting 3 Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. But these 3 Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe were 3 generations. The Alter Rebbe was a Rebbe for a long time. And the Alter Rebbe's Nesias developed and changed over time. The difference between one generation and another generation is very, very substantial. There was a chassid by Reb Zalman named Reb Zalman Zesmer there. Who was Reb Zalman Zesmer? I don't know who Reb Zalman Zesmer was. I'll just tell you this. Reb Zalman Zesmer was the mashpia of Reb Hillel Parash. You heard of Hillel Parash? Yeah. Reb Zalman Zesmer, Reb Hillel Parash is mashpia. So you don't know who Reb Hillel is, but understand that Reb Hillel's mashpia was Reb Zalman Zesmer. So you get an idea of Reb Zalman Zesmer. Reb Hillel Flagzog. This is brought in the Rishimis Chassidim. Reb Hillel was a very big chassid. He wasn't only a great chassid, he was a great chassid. In other words, it wasn't only was a great servant of the Eibush, he was very mekusha. His chassidus came from his kitchen to his Rebbe, which is really what chassidus is. Chassidus is not that you're very frum, but that your frumkeit comes from a connection to a Rebbe. Reb Hillel was a chassid in the sense that he was a big Eibush. But who is a big chassid because very mekusha to his Rabbi, to the middle Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. And Reb Hillel used to say, Jeder chassid darf haben a Rebbe mit a chassid. Those were his words. Every chassid needs a Rebbe and a chassid. And in our language, it means a Rebbe and a mashpia. That's what the Hillel meant to say. You need a Rebbe who tells you what to do, and a chassid, a mashpia, tells you how to do it. Reb Hillel's mashpia was Reb Zalman Zesmer. Reb Hillel mentions him in one of his sforim. Reb Hillel mentions in the beginning of the Yurim, Kutasai Spilos, he writes, Ani ro'isi Vilde Bale Meichen, I, Reb Hillel Parachet, who to Bar Mitzvah was a Boki in Shas Bavli, and Yerushalmi, and Kisvei Arizal, you understand, Reb Hillel to Bar Mitzvah, Aniro Isi Vilde Bale, I saw Vilde Bale Meichen, wild minds, Kemei Reb Zalman Zesmer. I saw brilliant, Reb Hillel himself was a genius. Aniro Isi Vilde, I saw great minds, Kemei Reb Zalman Zesmer. Reb Zalman Zesmer given sehr grace, even moidendig grace. There's a whole story how Reb Zalman Zesmer came to the Alter Rebbe. Reb Zalman Zesmer had a Rosh Yeshiva, a Rav, who was a Gadol B'Yisrael, a emes a Gadol B'Yisrael. And he had met the Alter Rebbe once during his lifetime. He was a Gadol, he was not a Chassid, he was not a Misnagid, he was a Gadol B'Yisrael, a Gora Geibnerit, involved in Nigle and Kabbalah, Rebbe Hashem, on levels which we don't even understand. And after he passed away, he came to his Talmud, Reb Zalman Zesmer, and told him to go to the Alter Rebbe. That's how he got to the Alter Rebbe. He came to him in a dream after he passed away and said, go to the Alter Rebbe. And Reb Zalman Zesmer came to the Alter Rebbe. Reb Zalman Zesmer for the greatest city with the Alter Rebbe. He's mentioned in Ayem Yom, that he had Meichen de Gadlus, with Ois Gora with the Meichen de Chovim. Maybe it's not Reb Zalman Zesmer. Reb Zalman Zesmer is called in Chassidus a Chacham be'etzem ke'er Chachmas. Now, you don't know what that means, and guess what? Very few people really understand what it means. The only thing I can tell you about a Chacham be'etzem ke'er Chachmas is that that's the Madrega of Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech and Reb Zalman Zesmer were both Chacham be'etzem ke'er Chachmas. They knew very well Reb Zalman Zesmer. Al Reb's a Chassid. Reb Zalman Zesmer was a Chacham be'etzem ke'er Chachmas, which is the Madrega of, you understand, Reb Zalman Zesmer. He had a phenomenal moyach, an incredible mind. And he was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And again, I want to emphasize, a chassid doesn't only mean that he learned Torah from the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe was his Rebbe, Reb Zalman Zesmer. Anyway, I gave you a long background on this Yid Reb Zalman Zesmer. So I'll sach mehr zu reden, but this is enough. Yeah. And then there was a chassid by the name of the Pesach Molostovki. The Pesach Molostovki was probably 20 or 30 years younger than Reb Zalman Zesmer. There was a huge gap in years. The Pesach Molostovki was considered the youngest chassid of the Alter Rebbe. The Pesach Malstovki was considered the youngest Chassid Alter Rebbe. He was by the Alter Rebbe, he was by the Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, and I think he was also by the Rebbe Marash. He's the one with the hot water, the cold water, and the lukewarm water. You know that story? There was a Chassid who used to get headaches. So he came to the Mittler Rebbe, told him to wash his head with hot water. And when the Mittler Rebbe was nostalgic, the headaches came back, so he came to the Tzemach Tzedek, he says, what hot water? Cold water. So he washed his head with cold water, the headaches went away. Tzemach Tzedek was nostalgic, he came to the Rebbe Marash, because the headaches came back, not hot, not cold, mix them together. So I stay by impatient. This is a Pesach Malstovki. But he was by the Alter Rebbe. I think he was about the same age as Reb Hillel. I don't think he was much older. But Reb Hillel was the Mittler Rebbe. The Pesach Malstovka was considered the youngest Rechsided Morazokin, and they were Yidden in Lubavitch in the times of Temchet Mimim who knew him. The Pesach Malstovka. Now, what does that mean? A Chassid, the Alter Rebbe, a Chassid, the Mittler Rebbe? It's not a little difference. It's an inarech. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidim were totally different than the Mittler Rebbe's Chassidim. That the Pesach Malstovka was about the Rebbe's Chassid. It says volumes. What those volumes are, Weismanish. But he was a very great man. But the Pesach Malstovki was not the Zalman Zezmer. He wasn't. The Zalman Zezmer was a Moyach Adir. He had a crazy, crazy brain. Meshug in a cup. Anyway, and between these two, Yemina, Smola, Benai, and Chala was sitting Rabbi Isaac Homler. Rabbi Isaac Homler you heard about. He's a famous name in Chabad. Rabbi Isaac Homler. He was also a Gadol Shebegdele. But Rabbi Isaac appreciated Reb Zalman Zezmer. Rabbi Isaac understood Reb Zalman. Reb Zalman had an incredible mind. Anyway, they're having a fabrengen. I mean, the three of them are sitting. It's like three generations. It's like a Zayda and Tata with a kid. They were all sitting with the Alter Rebbe, but there was a huge difference in their madrege. But they were all Emes Chassidim. So if I remember the story correctly, Rabbi Isaac was falling asleep. And in his half-awakened state, he hears Reb Pesach, who was a relatively young man, say to Reb Zalman Zezmer, who was a Godel and a Zokan, however he worded it, the Ibish soll helfen, als der Hart soll fühlen, what the Kopf begreift. That your heart should feel what your brain understands. It was what we call in the modern world a shtech. In the Pesach Malstovki was saying to Zalman Zezmer, your brain is incredible, yeah? But you're supposed to feel it in your heart. Now, for the Pesach Malstovka to tell Zalman Zezmer this was a chutzpah neiroch. It was totally not appropriate. As great as a Pesach Malstovka was, next to Zalman Zezmer it was a boy. But he meant it, and it came from a good place. So Rabbi Eisel was an Edis. He woke up. In other words, he was like falling asleep, and he hears this young chassid say to Zalman Zezmer, the Hadzol feeling with the Kabba greift. So Rabbi Eisel gets to say, and these are Rabbi Isaac's words. I think, I haven't seen this story in more than 20 years, and I no longer trust my memory. I used to trust my Zekon. Mir dachte, als steht, bin ich nispol geworden von der Pesachs Mesiras Nefesh und der Zalman's Midas Ha'emes. Which means I was impressed by two things. The Mesiras Nefesh of the Pesach Malstovka. He was not the person to tell Reb Zalman Zezmer, you need to have hearts. He was not the person to say it to him. You know, the Friedrich Rebbe used to say about the Bitche de Masmid, Itche kum korkis. So, but the dove has all him given. He says, Itche deserves a whipping. But there's nobody to give it to him, you understand? The Pesach Malstovka was not the man to give Musir to Reb Zalman Zezmer, but Reb Zalman needed to hear it. So the Pesach said it. So Rabbi Eisel said two things impressed me. For the Pesach to say that, so Reb Zalman Zezmer was such a chutzpah that it required either he was a chutzpah yak or he was a Mesiras Nefesh. Reb Zalman needed to hear it, so he told Reb Zalman what he needed to hear, even though he was the wrong messenger, but the right message. You understand? And Reb Zalman took it from him. He wasn't insulted. He didn't say, "Minig America, who you?" He took it from him. So Reb Isaac Homler said, I was impressed by the Mesiras Nefesh of the young chassid to tell an older chassid something which was not his place to tell. And I was impressed by the older chassid's readiness to receive it from a young chassid. This is called Vashavei Salav Avecha, you understand? Vashavei Salav Avecha, v'yadai tahayim. You have to understand in your mind the Eibishter. Vashavei Salav Avecha, you should feel the Eibishter in your heart. So Chassidus brings this Rambam, getting back to the point. Because the Rambam teaches that when you think about something, you will feel it. Now thinking about Ishtay Ubona, when you're standing on the front It takes about a quarter of a second or a tenth of a second to get the feelings, yeah. To think about that Eibishter takes a little longer. It takes a little longer, maybe it takes a lot longer. But the principle is the same. That what you think about, you will feel. And if you don't want to feel, don't think about it. And a person is in a position to control his thoughts, to control what he thinks. And if he's careful not to think inappropriate thoughts, he won't feel those things. And if he invests himself in thinking about things, he will develop feelings. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is describing. I'm going to read it again. Just the beginning. I'm going to let you go. Just go back to what we started with today. Yeah? It says, V'hein heim avo'eim. Remember that? It's 4 lines on the top of the page, yeah? They're a father and a mother. Chochmo bina. Hamelides. Which give birth to Avas Hashem v'Yirosei Yapachti. Loving the Eibishter, being awed by the Eibishter, and having a fear of the Eibishter. Key, because this is how it works. When you have an intuition and chochmah, and you take that inspiration you have in your chochmah and you think about it, not for a minute or two, but for as much time as necessary. You think about the greatness of the Eibishter, and Malak Kalam, and Sevav Kalam, and Kulach Mek Lachshiv. Says the Alter Rebbe, the teva of a person is that if you think about something long enough and hard enough, you'll feel it. Just like if you're in a war and you think about your children or your wife, it's going to make you feel it and it's going to prevent you from doing what you need to do. This is true when it comes to the Eibishter also. If you'll think about the Eibishter, nailed of, and you will give birth to, and you will awaken midas, different kinds of emotions. And here it says first yira, and then pachad, and then ahava. Okay, and we'll continue next week. We're probably going to reread the same words, but explain a different point.